Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're going to be talking about the Batman animated movie, Batman The Long Halloween Part 2. Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. As always, I'm your host, Brent, and today we're going to be talking about Batman The Long Halloween Part 2. This is the animated movie that just came out from DC Comics and Warner Brothers, DC Animation, whatever you want to call it. But before we get into that, please let me ask you to do one thing. Please subscribe. Helps me out, helps the channel grow, lets you know when I drop new videos, all that good stuff. So, Batman The Long Halloween Part 2 dropped today. Surprise, surprise. This was like a month out from the first one. I thought it was going to be a little bit longer, but it is out today on digital. So if you buy your movies that way, like I tend to do, then you can go get it. Otherwise, I think you might have to wait like maybe a month or so before the Blu-rays, 4Ks, whatever comes out. But this is part 2 of an adaptation of this book, Batman The Long Halloween, written by Jeff Loeb, art by Tim Sale. Now, we've talked about this before in the first review. My buddy Jim has a review up of this on the channel. I gave it to him to read and got his new reader first impression. I think this is a very good Batman story. It's one of my quintessential Batman stories, even though I'm not in love with the ending. And the last review I did of part 1, I kind of titled it like teetering on good because I really didn't know what to think of it. This movie, I think, instead of teetering on good, kind of stays in that mode. Like, it's more of a mediocre movie. There's a lot of people that are in the comments of some of my other videos crying that Part 1 is one of the best Batman, or best adaptations they've done so far. Me, personally, I think the Dark Knight Returns two-parter is still top tier of all these things. And I think what suffers this, Part 2 is not the animation. Animation's very good. It's very noir. I like the style they used here. It's not the voice acting. Josh Duhamel is a phenomenal Harvey Dent and a phenomenal Two-Face. Jensen Ackles is pretty good as Batman. Naya Rivera as Selina Kyle. I didn't even mention her last review, but she's just as good in this one as well. They give Catwoman a lot more to do. So it's not the voice cast. It's not Titus Welliver as Carmine Falcone. He's very good. I think it is actually the story that lets this one down. So I talked a little bit about the last review, how the ending of The Long Halloween always left me puzzled and perplexed. And I thought maybe since it's such a well-known story, they might change it up to make it a little bit clearer the way that it was in Batman Hush. Like, Batman Hush, turns out the Riddler is the villain all along. Not the Viller. The Riddler is the villain all along in Batman Hush. So instead of turning Hush into Tommy Elliott or the Clayface fake out or the Jason Todd, all that stuff is still kind of there, but they made Hush actually like Riddler jacked up on steroids or something like that. And for me, I was like, you know what? If you want Riddler to be the mastermind of all this stuff and have him play everything out, then having Riddler actually be Hush makes a little bit more sense in a shorter animated movie. Now, this is a straight-up adaptation, not an adaptation that's working into their DC Comics universe, right? So, this is more along the lines of The Dark Knight Returns. In that way, they stick to the book very strictly. Like, I was just turning through this before I started recording this video, and there are panels and moments and all that stuff torn out of this book. Some of the settings are changed, some of the dialogue maybe changed a little bit, but the back half of this book, the last 7 issues or so, is what is in this film. And, it's very slavishly reproduced or replicated or adapted, however you want to use this term, but it's in the way that the Zack Snyder Watchmen movie is to that book. Even though that did change the ending a little bit, it wasn't really the squid or anything. They'd made it Dr. Manhattan in the movie. So they don't change who the villain is. I think they make it a little bit clearer, but it's not quite the thing with The Long Halloween. I think that's always disappointing me is that there's never an aha moment, or you can follow all the clues all along, and you could beat the author to the conclusion that he does because the clues are all there. The clues are not all here in this book. You're kind of behind the 8 ball with Batman the whole time. And it's the same thing for this movie. So when they get to the end, and again, if you haven't seen the movie, the fact that they removed, if you haven't seen the movie, don't watch from here on out at all. Just know I think it's mediocre. It's okay, and you might want to check it out if you're interested. But from spoilers on here, the fact that they removed Alberto Falcone at the end of the first movie, who is one of the holiday killers in the book, I thought was a strong choice. I was very interested in it. I was like, oh, this might be going somewhere decent, going somewhere good. And that's what I was talking about when I said teetering on good, because that move of taking him off the board for the rest of the adaptation, I thought was really a strong choice, because he, in the book, is like, it's not clear how many holiday murders he did, right? So in this adaptation, it's kind of like, they make Gilda Dent out to be the holiday killer the entire time, almost as if Alberto Falcone had nothing to do with it. And that kind of removes, Alberto Falcone was an interesting character at the end of the day in this book, because he wasn't what he was trying to do to help his father, help Carmine Falcone realize he was capable of something, or to get revenge because Carmine didn't think he was capable. That was an interesting thing, because you had this squirrely guy that's taking out all these mobsters. And then to have Gilda do it all is still interesting, and it's still true to the book. The thing they gave her, this romance with Alberto, I think rang a little false, a little hollow. So they tried to make it like, she was killing the Falcones because her and Alberto had a romance when she was at Oxford, and that was something that wasn't I don't remember that in the book at all, this Oxford tidbit that they dropped here in this last part of the movie. And her and Alberto were in love, they got engaged, they were married, she was pregnant when they got married, so the marriage was annulled, and they ripped the baby out of her. Really gruesome stuff. And so it's for that reason that the Falcone family ruined her life and ripped her baby out. We don't know what happened to this baby. I'm assuming it was aborted and is gone. Gruesome stuff. That's why she goes after the Falcones, not because, of anything else. In the, it's clearer, but it wasn't like an aha moment the way that the Riddler twist on Hush was. So I think for that reason, I'm digging this movie a little bit, and I'm digging it a little bit more because it is so slavish to the material. And at the end of the day, I don't think this movie is, even the first one, like when you're gonna pair these two together and they're gonna be a whole 3-hour film. I don't know, this film, both of these films I think are slogs, in a little bit. Other people are going to be like, oh, Brent, this is one of the best things that ever come out. And I'm like, dude, I think what I was talking to my friend the other day, Ian, about this, is like, these might be leaning a little bit more into the anime style of animation than the American style. And what I mean by that is not typically the art style, but anime for me sometimes doesn't work, because there are long moments without music. And because anime, or the Japanese or Korean, South Korean animation companies that are doing these movies, or those cartoons, whatever you want to call them, are low budget, let's just call it what it is. There's they reuse a whole lot of things, which is fine, but not using music a lot tends to make me lose interest very quickly. Whereas typical American animation, if you go watch Batman the Animated Series, Justice League Unlimited, Justice League, Superman, all these other classic DC, Warner Brothers stuff. Hell, even if you go back to the 90s Spider-Man animated series, there's music throughout, right? Go watch He-Man or something. Even the new one, there's music throughout, keeping your attention dialed in, raising your emotions up and down. And anime doesn't typically do that. And they're doing that here as well, not using music a whole lot. Only in certain moments, and I don't know if that's to save on score, or if they're really trying to make this feel like a noir film, which they do with the style and the smoke and the color palette, stuff like that. But for me, I want my animation to deliver on something. So if you're going to skimp on number of frames or the style of animation and simplifying things down. I don't have an issue with that, but don't skimp on the music for me if you're going to make this for an American audience. That's just me, and that might be why I'm not really jiving with this new style of DC films, because the old DC films before we jumped here was music heavy, right? There was music all the time, and I love that about them. This new one, Man of Tomorrow, Justice League, Justice Society, World War II, these two Long Halloween films, I think are a little bit lacking on the music a little bit, because they like these long silent pauses. And for me, like, if you're doing a long silent pause, that means you should be building tension, right? In normal filmmaking, typically you're building tension, or you're having a pitter-patter dialogue, and you really need to hear the dialogue. In this movie and the one before that, I feel like the long silences are not really meant to build tension. Sometimes there's just characters walking through the hall, and it's like, why do I have to hear the clicking of the feet if you're not going to have some music? Or you could throw something behind that, I don't know, or there could be elevator music kind of playing in the background that would set the tone of where we are. So all around, I feel like that this style is kind of lacking in the music department. I want more music in my films, dude. You got great composers out there. Let's do it. So I'm going to ding this movie for that. The lack of music, I think, is the number one problem. But being so slavish to the adaptation and not really making it, I thought, since they were capable of doing it in Hush in a way that I really liked, I thought maybe they could do it here as well. And I've always thought this ending suffered a bit, and this ending, I think, still suffers because it's such a left turn. You were never really seeing any instances where you could piece this together. The same way it is in the book, but I would think that a movie, if you're going to expand this to 3 hours over 2 parts, you might take the time to lay those in there to make it clearer why it was Gilda the whole time, especially if you're going to take Alberto Falcone off the board. In here, there's also something, what made it really confusing in the book, not necessarily the movie, was that it was Alberto Falcone, then it was Gilda, and then it was Harvey, before he became Two-Face, 1 or 2 times, not clear which ones, and then it went back to Gilda after Harvey became Two-Face. So that many twists and turns of who was the holiday killer makes this ending fall flat, even though that's not really what the book's about, even though that's the central thing it moves around. Overall, the Long Halloween is about Gotham City moving from a mob-oriented criminal base to the crazies, lunatic-oriented criminal base, right? You do have that here in the movies. You see a lot more characters, a lot more of the rogues gallery here in this one. Scarecrow, Mad Hatter, Solomon Grundy, Two-Face, Joker makes another appearance here. So all that is still true. It's all happened in the book, but I don't think you really made the mystery that clear or that interesting, more, other than what it was in the book. And for me, if you can't have if you're going to adapt something and you don't really have a great take on it, if you're just we're just going to adapt it, unless it's a standout thing, Dark Knight Returns is standout. Anybody can look at that and go, that's a standout piece of work. Long Halloween, I really feel like as a book by itself, people might love it or hate it. They're going to maybe love or hate the art. It's very good, but it's not, it really does fall flat at the ending there. So if you're not really going to make it who the holiday killer is, if you're not going to make it clear or lay those plot lines and make it clear for the viewer who it is or why, I think it falls flat. And just this whole thing with Alberto Falcone and their history was just oh, well, since it wasn't clear, let's give her a reason to do that other than the love of her husband, which was the real reason it was in the book. So I don't have an issue with them changing the reason. It was just it felt ham-fisted from the reason it was in the book was she wanted to spend more time with Harvey, she wanted to have a baby with him, and he was so busy with these fucking mobsters that he didn't have time for her, and that's the reason she wanted to help take them off the board. And they still kind of have that here, and it's which is it? Is it Alberto Falcone and the revenge on the Falcone crime family, or is it because you really did love Harvey and you wanted to have a baby with him? I guess it can be both, but there's no real reason for it to be both in the movie. It should be one or the other. You're either going to adapt it or you're really going to make this about a revenge thing. And even then, you could have laid the seeds better if there was a scene between Alberto and Gilda and all this other stuff. To me, Gilda seemed to stay on the sidelines. And you could have laid the groundwork a little bit better. And I don't think anybody would have gotten mad if you'd done that in an adaptation. Although there are people that are mad that Iris West is black in the World War II Justice Society. And to people like that, I gotta say, fuck off. It's ridiculous. But, to change things, to make things better, is never the wrong thing to do. In my opinion. So if you want to include more people, fine, let's do it. If you're going to make things better, fine, let's do it. But you got to make things better. You got to make it so more people are more interested in this type of stuff, because we're not going to survive comic books very much longer. The market's growing and growing and growing, but I think it's growing because there's more old people reading it, old people like you and me. So we got to get younger fans in here, and younger fans, they want more diverse stuff. So you got to cater to the younger fans. That's the same problem when I was reading comic books. I'm still reading them, but when I was younger, we were crying about the older fans, the boomer generation that were still collecting, who were crying about, the stuff from Infinite Crisis and didn't like that stuff, or the Green Lantern Jeff Johns change that we were reading that was new to us, and we were like, holy cow, this is amazing, and the same thing that happened now, people complaining about, oh, we're going to make, have more diverse characters in our world, is stupid. So, people like you can stop watching my videos. That's fine. But anyway, I really do feel like, it's a very Slavish part 2 and part 1. So altogether, I think instead of teetering on good, this is a mediocre film, a pair of films. And part 2 especially, I think it does suffer a little bit too, because you just jump right in. There's no real recap or anything like that. Even on the menu, I think that's a bummer. Dark Knight worked in 2 parts, mainly because there was a clear beginning, middle, and not beginning, middle, and end, but there was 4 chapters, and each chapter told a different story. And the first 2 chapters was about the mutants, Batman coming back, and the mutants, and then 3 and 4 of the Dark Knight books was the tale with the Joker and the tale with Superman. So you had a clear delineation of here's where we're at. And maybe even a little bit of time jump between chapter 2 and chapter 3 in those 4 books. So even when you read it in a graphic novel, it's very disparate, separate stories. So that break in the middle there for the animated adaptation worked very well. They broke Long Halloween, I think, at the end of issue 4 or 5 out of a 13 issue story. So they broke it kind of early, and they got rid of this other character, and then they jumped in, and now all of a sudden Bruce Wayne is taken over by Poison Ivy, which is straight from the books, nothing new there, but there's no introduction or anything. They could have used in the introduction they had all the comic book panels by Tim Sale with the chalk line. You could have, I think, made a recap a la Spider-Man 2 with the Alex Ross artwork, right? Could have done a little bit of that in this credits scene to get audiences back into the mood, oh yeah, I remember that moment, Could have done a little bit of that, but hey, you don't want to do that? Okay, fine. I know eventually they're probably going to release this as one whole long 3-hour film, and it might flow better that way, but just as a standalone film, I needed a recap. I needed a little bit of oh yeah, even though it's just a story I've read many, many times, because I had to recall at the beginning, I was like, where's Alberto Falcone? He's like, oh yeah, they ended very strongly in that first part by taking him off the board, but everything else in this adaptation, this part was so slavish. They didn't have the guts to do anything new other than to give Alberto Falcone and Gilda Dent this weird romance. So that was kind of a bummer that they did not have more guts in this version, to continue to do what they did so strongly in the first part. So I don't know. I did like how Catwoman was a bigger character in here. There was more romance with her and Bruce. In the book, she's still kind of not really clear on whether she's a good guy or bad guy. In here, she's clearly on Batman's side. They give the whole thing about her dad being Alberto Falcone, which I don't remember I don't think you find it out in Long Halloween. I think it's more in Dark Victory that you find it out, which is the sequel. That's this book right here. It's another 13-issue series by the same creators that follows up on the Falcone crime family in Gotham and introduces Robin. That's a fun part about this book. But I don't think you found out that about Catwoman until this book, if I'm wrong. But they came out and told it here, what I got no problems with. I think it makes it clear her motivations on why she's trying to hurt Falcone or trying to save certain people. That's good. It gives Naya Rivera more to do. This is her last performance. Sadly, she passed away. I think it was last year. Some freak accident. It's terrible. But I think the performances are strong. The animation style is pretty cool. It's just I need more music, and you were too slavish to the book. And I think when the book fails to begin with and you're too slavish to it, I think it's the wrong move. So there you go. If you're going to adapt another book, let's have a new take on it, the way you did with Hush. I think that's the right way to go, unless it drastically changes the story. If it improves upon it, let's do it. But I don't know. I don't think there's anything I'd really like to see another Slavish adaptation of. Like, we already did Court of Owls in Batman vs. Robin, that animated movie. If you're gonna do like a Nightfall, Night Quest kind of thing, then yeah, let's adapt it, but let's do it the way we did some of the other ones. Let's just take it as the basis and then really make the story work, really make it tight, really make it awesome. I think that would be a cool thing to see, but I don't necessarily want to see it as slavish as The Long Halloween was. So there you go. That's my take on The Long Halloween. Put the hate down in the comments. I'll read them and reply to them down below. Let me know what you guys thought of Batman The Long Halloween Part 2, and I will see you guys next time in the Funny Pages.